Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asyrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Alhamdulillah. In the previous video, I have explained to you our Pi-CBT model, positive Islamic psychology model, on the nature in which how we're going to understand how we integrate CBT model and understanding of cognitive thoughts and the nature of the mind, which we are discussing in quite detail. Because once we understand the nature of the mind, then we can understand the nature of the intuitive feelings and emotion and the realm of which Allah sent us. That means from the realm of our existence, from when Allah created us, He gave us this domain, the three domain which I've mentioned, which constitute our nafs, our roh, our qalb, our aqal. And this, I derived this from the writings of all the great scholars. For example, the most prominent of it is Al-Imam Ghazali, Ibn al-Qayyim, Ibn Miskiyah, and the rest. So, according to Imam Ghazali, the loci of our control in this world is the qalb. So this is the intuitive heart we are talking about. So at that level, the three realms that we are talking about, the realms of the roh, qalb, and aqal, they are interchangeable according to the situational condition and according to the role in which it is to be manifested. So for example, if we talk about spirituality, of awareness of Allah, of awareness of the grandeur of Allah, we're talking about the spiritual aspect of existence. Then the roh is dominant. So at level 1, it is the roh constitute the main dominant realm of existence at that point, and the qalb is the subsidiary, and the aqal is also subsidiary, and this is the total nafs. This is level 1 of manifestation that Allah give us. But because these three realms are interchangeable, at the intuitive heart, now the dominant role now is the qalb. The qalb is now dominating the loci of control. So as we live in this world, we have to develop our intuitive heart. Alright? And this qalb is dominant, and then we have our aqal and the roh. Now, how are we going to understand our mind? In Islam, we can understand our mind because at the realm of the mind, it is the aqal. We're talking about the conscious, subconscious, and supraconscious mind. We are talking about the whole realm of our existence. So at this point, actually, we are talking about the aqal. Alright? So we can equate Islamic perspective of aqal much more than the idea of mind in the modern world today. There's a lot of research in the mind, which I'm going to play a video by Dan Siegel, Professor Dan Siegel, one of the foremost scholar in mind, body, relationship, and integrated neurobiology. And he explained the mind is a form of energy. Good, we can understand, we can accept that. Alright, and we know that energy is destructible. One created is not destructible. It is conscious, so there is consciousness in the mind. It is giving information, and it communicates. So there is communication between you and me. As you watch this video, I'm communicating, my mind is communicating with you through what? Through the sound wave of the video, and also through the visual cortex, and also through the energy that emanates from the mind. And what it is, again, this is where most of the modern scholars will stop, because then at that level you're talking about the realm of the spiritual already. So it is moving up to this scale from level 3 to level 2 to level 1. So I want to tell you that basically, inshallah, you'll understand that Islam has the most perfect model of the understanding of the mind. Okay? So inshallah, I'll pray this very deep work of what is the mind by Professor Dan Siegel, and then I'll explain further how we can integrate and use this understanding, this knowledge that Allah has blessed us in the 21st century, referring back to the scholars of the past, how we can now validate their intuitive knowledge that Allah has given them 1,000 years ago, more than 1,000 years ago, that Allah has ordained upon this idea, which was revealed upon to our Prophet Muhammad SAW and carried through by Muslim scholars over the ages. So now I'm trying to explain to you. So they are coming closer and closer to us. So if you study this, you can understand that the materialist world now is moving towards a post-materialist world. Yeah, and this post-materialist world, the nature of the mind is one of the research areas that they are thinking about and working about. But from the Islamic perspective, this is the manifestation of the Aqal, which is the loci of control at this level, the qalb working in synergy with it, the ruh working in synergy with it, and the total nafs working in synergy that will give us peace, happiness, fulfillment, achievement, success, understanding the meaning and purpose in life, on being the Caliph of Allah, and so many of those gifts that Allah has showered upon us out of His divine love and grace to us. Okay, so I'll just play that video and then inshallah I will continue.
And I'm a clinical professor at the UCLA School of Medicine and the executive director of the MindSight Institute. What we do at the Institute is to look at well-being across a wide array of sciences and then ask the question, what is the mind? And then ask the question, what is a healthy mind? So in our approach, we synthesize all the fields of science into one framework, and that's called interpersonal neurobiology. So what I'm going to be sharing with you are some take-home messages for what you might do in your life differently because of the lessons we've learned from the consilient approach of interpersonal neurobiology. Consilient means we look for the universal findings across independent disciplines and then use those findings to ask the question, how can we help bring well-being into our lives? So one of the first things we learned from interpersonal neurobiology is that the word mind actually doesn't have a common definition. So in my field, psychiatry, the caretaker of the mind, the psyche is defined as the spirit, the soul, the intellect, and the mind. I'm a caretaker of the mind, but I was never told what the mind is. And in fact, when I did my research fellowship through the National Institute of Mental Health, I studied with psychologists, and the field of psychology also has no definition of mind. In fact, when you look at all the fields of mental health, which include psychology, psychiatry, nursing, social work, etc., none of us have a definition of the mind. So in my latest book, Mind, A Journey to the Heart of Human Being, I address this question of what the mind is by asking the question, what could this mind thing be? So if we pause for a moment, you think to yourself, well, I have a mind, and certainly you do, or you wouldn't be hearing what I'm saying. What is your mind? Now, if you think about it, it may be really hard to answer, and you wouldn't be alone because it's not only the field of mental health that lacks a definition, but you went through schooling, and in education, actually, even though people say, as teachers, we want to train the mind of our students, educate the mind of our students, the field of education has no definition of mind, amazingly. And short of the phrase, the mind is what the brain does, equating mind with brain activity, which is what neuroscience tends to do, short of that, there actually is no definition of mind, even in the academic fields that study mind. So don't feel so badly if you're feeling, well, I don't have a definition of mind, what's wrong with me? It's actually what you share with the rest of humanity. So I'll ask you a question. What does the word mind mean for you? When you say, well, I'm listening to this video, I'm using my mind to listen to it, I want to have a healthy mind. How can I have a healthy mind if I don't know what the mind is? Let's look into that in a deep kind of way right now. The mind, of course, is referring to your thinking and your feeling and your remembering and your paying attention. And all those are good descriptions of what's called the content of the mind. And the mind includes your ability to have a subjective texture, what's called subjective experience, the felt experience of being alive. But the only way you know you have subjective experience, like if I clap my hands like that, what that felt like to hear the clapping, that would be called subjective experience. Or if you hear a buzzing sound that's around here in Aspen, you may wonder, are those bees? Is that some machine? What is it? You're questioning yourself. That's a part of consciousness. So feeling subjective questioning, feeling the subjective texture of the buzzing, All of that is your subjective experience, and you know you have that because you have something called consciousness. So we have information processing, that's your thinking and feeling and remembering. We have subjective experience, we have consciousness, and these are good descriptions of the processes of the mind. But there's a fourth definition of the mind that I want to offer you very briefly that gives us a gateway to well-being, because it's actually very difficult from a scientific or even professional point of view to say if your mind is consciousness, subjective experience, and information processing, then a healthy mind is what? Well, you'd say, well, I want to have healthy thoughts. Well, does that mean if you have a, quote, negative thought, it's unhealthy? If someone is mistreating you and you get angry and that's called a negative emotion, is that an unhealthy emotion? Or are those thoughts and feelings actually natural responses that will protect you and are part of well-being? So just talking about information processing, subjective experience, and consciousness actually doesn't get us anywhere close to what well-being might be. But this fourth aspect of mind actually does. And it comes from a long line of reasoning that I first described in a book called The Developing Mind, which talks about how a child's mind develops in the setting of relationships, and asks the question, why does a relationship shape the structure of a child's brain? What do relationships and the brain share in common? If I'm going to give you anything that might be useful about your well-being, what I would suggest to you is that responding to that question, what is a relationship and what does your brain share in common, is actually going to allow you to have what Louis Pasteur said is chance favors the prepared mind. Your mind will be prepared to create well-being within you and between you and the world, and to help other people develop well-being by addressing that question. The common ground for a relationship and a brain is actually what's happening now between me and you. If I suddenly go, you may say, oh, where's the sound on this video, right? So if the energy of air molecules moving, called sound, doesn't come from me to you, it changes our relationship. In fact, relationships can be defined as the sharing of energy. Now, sometimes energy is pure energy, and sometimes energy is information, like if I say Aspen, or if I say the United States, or if I say love. All of those are linguistic patterns of energy, whether they're spoken, and so these are airwaves of sound energy, or they might be written down as light energy from the photons reflecting off a book. So either way, it's patterns of energy with symbolic value or information. And because these things change, we have a phrase, energy and information flow. So here's the wild thing I'll say to you. If energy and information flow happens inside your brain, which it does, that's basically what the whole brain is about, electrochemical energy flow, which creates neural representations, which are symbolic patterns of energy that have deep influences on how the brain processes information. So energy and information flow, like hearing that sound and wondering who dropped something, you have all sorts of information out there in your mind that goes not just in your head, by the way, goes throughout your whole body. So we have this embodied energy and information flow, and then we have what's happening between us. So then you could say, okay, got it. What's shared between a brain and a relationship is energy and information flow. It's embodied for the brain, and it's shared in a relationship. Now the question I ask you is this: who cares? You go, I don't. Well, here's why you should care. Because what I'm going to suggest to you now is very different from the implications of modern academics. And in fact, Hippocrates 2,500 years ago said that the mind, its joys and sorrows, only come from your head. He was followed 125 years ago by William James, the father of modern psychology, who also said it's so obvious the mind just comes from the brain that we'll just posit that and go on because everything will support that. What I'm going to suggest to you is that those two very thoughtful, bright contributors to modern society may have been telling us a partial truth. And if you believe the partial truth, it not only paralyzes you to understand the full picture of the mind, but it may actually even be destructive. You may say, whoa, what we're believing for 2,500 years in modern society is destructive? Why would that be? Well, here's what I want to suggest to you. Think about your relationships with people close to you. Do you ever find your relationships change how you feel or what you think or what you pay attention to? If the answer is no, then go on to the final segment of this video. But if the answer is yes, that yes, relationships shape my mental experience, then if I ask you the next question, well, if you go out drinking the night before, or if you're really, really starving and can't think straight, or you're exhausted, does your bodily state, what you stick inside your mouth or how tired you are, does it influence your mental life? And if you say yes, then we have two interesting things. Relationships and the state of the body influence your mental life. So what we're going to say now is that the mind, your information processing, subjective experience, consciousness, and now we're going to get to this fourth aspect of mind, that your mind is actually emerging from energy and information flow that is both embodied and relational. Now you may hear that and say, that's really weird because that's two places at once. That's exactly what I'm saying. But it's not really two places. It's one system. Your skull nor your skin are impermeable boundaries for energy and information flow. It's one system with various locations. So then you say, well, okay, if that's true, if the mind is some emergent property, is the mathematical term, what's the system from which it's arising? It's energy and information flow that's both in your body, not just your head. So this is where there was a limited story we've been told for 2,500 years. And that, in fact, it is flowing not just within you, but between you and others, and you and the world, you and the trees, you and the planet. So then you go, hold on, what kind of thing would be doing that? And when you look at the aspects of this system, it has the mathematical term, a complex system. And what's happening is it's arising from, that's the emergent property, and one of the emergent properties is self-organization is the term. It comes back and it self-organizes, it regulates that from which it arose. So here's the proposal I made a long, long time ago, 25 years ago, that the mind can be seen as a self-organizing, embodied and relational, emergent process that is regulating energy and information flow. And if that's what the mind is, this fourth aspect of the mind, then you can ask the question, how do I optimize self-organization? And that we can talk about next.
Alhamdulillah, you can see how close Professor Dan Siegel is coming to the idea of Islam. Because basically, when we talk about the Aqal, what is the Aqal? The Aqal is an energy. Allah has created that, that form of energy that we call, at this operational level of the Aqal, it is conscious. It is giving information about the nature of our existence, the nature of our existence with others, our relationship, and our relationship to the world, to the universe. And this is repeatedly explained in the Al-Quranul Kareem, many verses of us to reflect and see our relationship from the perspective of utilizing the Aqal. All right? So the definition of the mind is coming close to our definition, Islamic definition of the Aqal. And inshallah, if they can progress to understanding of the Qalb and the Ruh, then we have the full model. All right? But what is important is for us as Muslims to know that Allah has revealed to us the truth. This is the truth. So this cognitive model of just CBT about the brain only, as Professor Dan Siegel has mentioned, it is half truth. It is not the full truth. But because the research done in terms of cognitive behavior therapy is useful, so we take it. But we know we must transcend to the mind, to the intuitive heart, and to understand the nature of our existence. Only then we can we know why we are here, what are we supposed to do in this world, what are the things that we should do to be the Caliph of Allah, striving to be good, to help others to be good and make the world good, and how we can achieve peace, happiness and success, not only in this world and then hereafter, and so many of the existential questions that only when you realize the nature of your being, conscious of who you are and why you are here, you then understand the nature of the mind, and you understand the nature of existence, and then inshallah you'll achieve all the good things that Allah has showered upon us from His divine grace and love, inshallah.